I stared at the message my girlfriend, Sarah, sent me on WeChat, feeling a bit dumbfounded.
Your first love is back. I'm stepping aside.
I sent a question mark in response. A red exclamation mark appeared next to the message. Below it, a small line of text popped up. The other party has enabled friend verification. You are not their friend yet. All I did was have a meal with my childhood friend, Lily, who returned to the country with my buddy Ethan. My phone died during the meal, and I missed Sarah's dozen or so calls. Did she really need to block me on WeChat and my phone? Despite these thoughts, I felt a bit uneasy. I handed the drunken Lily over to Ethan.
Hey, what are you doing? You can't just leave her like this.
Ignoring his protests, I hurriedly took a cab back home. When I opened the door, I was stunned. The house was spotless, immaculately clean. But all the couple's items were halved. Slippers, cushions, mugs, stuffed animals, toothbrushes. I rushed into the bedroom and found that Sarah had taken all her clothes, even the matching socks were halved. I had been out for less than 3 hours, and the whole place looked like no one else had ever lived there. No joke, my girlfriend had vanished into thin air. Narrator, tone, uneasy. Despite these thoughts, I felt a bit uneasy. I handed the drunken Lily over to Ethan. Ignoring his protests, I hurriedly took a cab back home. When I opened the door, I was stunned. The house was spotless, immaculately clean. But all the couple's items were halved. Slippers, cushions, mugs, stuffed animals, toothbrushes. Narrator, tone, terrified. I rushed into the bedroom and found that Sarah had taken all her clothes, even the matching socks were halved. I had been out for less than 3 hours, and the whole place looked like no one else had ever lived there. No joke, my girlfriend had vanished into thin air. I squatted outside Sarah's villa, pulling at the grass.
If I really had something with her, it would have happened already. What does it have to do with you?
Moments later, the villa door slammed shut in my face.
Why does she think I like Lily? Why does she believe she's just a stand-in?
If it weren't for this small mole on my temple that looks just like Lily's, you wouldn't have noticed me, right?
My gentle, beautiful, and wealthy girlfriend had cast herself in the role of a substitute from the day I started pursuing her. Did that make me the two-timing jerk in this story?
I didn't even know Lily had a mole on her temple.
I pursued Sarah because I saw her at my father's company and was instantly smitten by this stunning woman. Later, I found out she was my father's business partner, which only made her more appealing to me.
From then on, I bombarded her with messages, and flowers became a routine gift. I would even wait for hours outside her office just to invite her to dinner.
At first, she was very cold towards me. Later, she was neither warm nor cold, never clearly rejecting or accepting me.
I've never pursued anyone like this before. Are you going to say yes or no? What do you mean by keeping me hanging?
I had never been so serious about chasing a girl, and I was genuinely losing patience. Perhaps my sincerity moved Sarah. She stared into my eyes for a long time before nodding. From that day on, we officially started dating. After we got together, I realized Sarah's life was incredibly simple, almost unlike that of a typical girl. But then again, she was a CEO. She could go a whole week without coming home, living and working at the office, with nothing in her life but work.
It took me 5 years to force my way into her world. Now, she was telling me I had knocked on the wrong door from the start. I was having a hard time accepting it.
Despite these thoughts, I felt a bit uneasy. I handed the drunken Lily over to Ethan.
What are you doing? You can't just leave her here.
Ignoring his protests, I hurriedly took a cab back home. When I opened the door, I was stunned. The house was spotless, immaculately clean. But all the couple's items were halved. Slippers, cushions, mugs, stuffed animals, toothbrushes. I rushed into the bedroom and found that Sarah had taken all her clothes, even the matching socks were halved. I had been out for less than 3 hours, and the whole place looked like no one else had ever lived there. No joke, my girlfriend had vanished into thin air. Sarah had a helpful neighbor. When they saw someone climbing into the long vacant house next door, they not only called the homeowner but also alerted the police. Sarah and I spent a long time at the police station explaining the situation before the officers finally believed I wasn't a thief.
Don't do anything so risky again.
As we walked out of the station, the officer continued to sternly lecture me. I nodded repeatedly, thinking it was just climbing a wall, and I ended up at the police station. Sarah remained silent, her gloomy demeanor making me too scared to speak. The last time she was this angry was when I stayed out drinking until dawn without telling her. She had searched for me for hours and finally found me at a bar, her eyes red with worry. A phone ringing broke the tense atmosphere between us. I pulled out my phone and saw it was Lily. Sarah's face darkened, and she turned to walk away.
Listen to what she has to say.
I grabbed her sleeve to stop her. I answered the call, and Lily's slurred voice came through.
James, where did you go? Come back and drink with me.
For a moment, I didn't know whether to grab my phone or cover Sarah's ears. Lily was clearly still not sober. Sarah's expression was unreadable as she quietly listened to Lily's ramblings.
You have no idea how much I miss you. You're so heartless, not even visiting me abroad.
With each word Lily said, my heart sank further. By the time she finally fell silent, my heart felt colder than a knife used to fillet fish for a decade. After the call ended, Sarah's face was expressionless, but I could see a hint of abandonment in her eyes.
She was just drunk and talking nonsense. Don't believe her.
Sarah gritted her teeth, shook off my hand, and quickly got into the car. Under my shocked gaze, she drove away without hesitation. I had a gut feeling that Sarah was hiding something from me. So, the next day, I went to Green Pine High School to find my former homeroom teacher, Mr. Brown. The old man hadn't changed a bit in over 10 years.
You look completely different now. You used to give me the most headaches. Your name was always at the top of the demerit list.
I was young and foolish back then. Teacher, do you remember Sarah?
Of course, I remember her. She was a legend at our school.
How come I've never heard of this?
How could you not know? Her name was always on the honor roll. Besides, she even wrote you a love letter.
What? I was completely taken aback.
I remember I kept all the confiscated love letters together. Found it.
He rummaged under his desk and pulled out a square envelope. Suddenly, a not-so-pleasant memory popped into my head. In high school, there was a prefect who loved to catch me for any rule-breaking. Not wearing the school badge, not in uniform, being late, leaving early, I was always caught red-handed by her. Even if I pleaded with her, she would still mark my name on the demerit list. The face of the prefect in my memory slowly overlapped with that of the female CEO. Oh my gosh! I remembered now. Once, I was standing in the hallway, enjoying the breeze, and bumped into this prefect again. I nervously checked myself to make sure there was nothing she could deduct points for and waited for her to pick a fight. But she said nothing, just handed me an envelope. The fighting spirit I had just mustered was instantly deflated, and I took the letter, bewildered. But I disliked her so much at the time that I never even opened it. I think I just stuffed it into my desk, and later, it disappeared without me noticing.
Since you're here today, I'll give it back to you.
I took it with mixed feelings. My girlfriend had a crush on me in high school, and my girlfriend was the person I disliked the most in high school. I couldn't tell which of these two facts shocked me more. All I knew was that I felt dazed when I got home.
With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and began to read.
Dear James,
애교.
I am Sarah from Class 4, Grade 12. I think you are very handsome. The results of this month's exam will be out on Friday. If I am still the top student, can I invite you to the Botanical Garden at 8 a.m. on Saturday?
There were only a few short sentences, but I stared at them for a long time. What was I doing that Saturday? I couldn't remember.
During high school weekends, I was most likely hanging out with Lily and Ethan. The three of us grew up together and stuck together through thick and thin. We were quite rebellious in high school and did many foolish things.
What was Sarah doing back then? Perhaps she chose the safest condition, as being the top student was really easy for her. Then, on Saturday morning, she waited for me at the botanical garden full of hope, only to leave disappointed when I didn't show up. She might have even seen me wandering the streets with Lily.
I've always been carefree and never regretted anything. But now, a feeling akin to regret suddenly surged in my heart. What if, just what if, I had opened that letter back then? What would have happened?
Sarah was somewhat isolated in high school, had few friends, and spent all her time studying. So, her writing a love letter to a boy really surprised all the teachers, especially since the recipient was a problem student like you, who had nothing in common with her.
How did you get the letter, Mr. Brown?
I just remember someone handed it to me.
Who could have given the letter to Mr. Brown? Despite these thoughts, I felt a bit uneasy. I handed the drunken Lily over to Ethan.
James, are you sure you don't need help?
Ignoring his protests, I hurriedly took a cab back home. When I opened the door, I was stunned. The house was spotless, immaculately clean. But all the couple's items were halved. Slippers, cushions, mugs, stuffed animals, toothbrushes. I rushed into the bedroom and found that Sarah had taken all her clothes, even the matching socks were halved. I had been out for less than 3 hours, and the whole place looked like no one else had ever lived there. No joke, my girlfriend had vanished into thin air. Despite these thoughts, I felt a bit uneasy.
Ethan, take care of Lily.
But James,
Ignoring his protests, I hurriedly took a cab back home. When I opened the door, I was stunned. The house was spotless, immaculately clean. But all the couple's items were halved. Slippers, cushions, mugs, stuffed animals, toothbrushes.
Sarah?
I rushed into the bedroom and found that Sarah had taken all her clothes, even the matching socks were halved. I had been out for less than 3 hours, and the whole place looked like no one else had ever lived there. No joke, my girlfriend had vanished into thin air.
Sarah, it's not that I don't want to believe you.
Sarah looked up at me, her eyes brimming with tears.
It's that I'm afraid to believe, James. 10 years ago, I couldn't even get you to look at me. How could I dare to hope for your affection now, 10 years later? In high school, you were inseparable from Lily, and the first time you messaged me was right after she went abroad.
So, are you really willing to leave me just like that?
Not willing.
I tugged at her cheek.
You seem pretty willing to me, running off so fast, afraid I'd find you.
Actually, I was about to come looking for you in a few days.
Even though you thought I still liked Lily?
Yes.
Hearing Sarah's affirmative tone, I couldn't help but laugh. Then I composed myself, pushed her away, and put on a stern face. Her expression was one of confusion, probably wondering why my attitude had suddenly changed.
We've been together for 5 years, right?
Sarah nodded.
In these 5 years, have I ever treated you poorly?
Sarah shook her head again.
Then what makes you think I don't like you and still like Lily? Have I ever crossed any boundaries with her?
Realizing something, Sarah reached out to grab me. I stepped back, avoiding her hand.
You don't trust me at all, ready to leave without a word. Sarah, do you think you're being reasonable?
No, James,
What does my love mean to you? What do I mean to you?
I turned away with difficulty and walked out.
Think about it yourself.
Hey, man. Why are you still crashing at my place?
I scrolled through the apology messages Sarah had sent me over the past few days.
I don't want to go home.
Sarah had taken all the love and tenderness I had shown her as if it were meant for someone else. It was an insult to my feelings. I used to think she was just someone who didn't express her emotions openly, but now it seemed she had been silently hurting all along. Angrily, I turned off my phone, growing more furious by the minute.
And what about Lily? She's been asking about you these past few days. What did she do to make you so mad?
Just hearing her name gave me a headache.
Hey! She invited us both to dinner. She said you blocked her and asked me to bring you along. Are you going?
Yes. I need to clear some things up.
Lily had booked a table at my favorite restaurant. She was sitting in a private room, looking a bit worn out. Her eyes lit up when she saw Ethan and me.
James! I thought you wouldn't come.
Hey! Hey! I'm still here. Can you only see James?
His remark instantly made the atmosphere awkward. I kept a stern face and ignored the chair Lily had arranged for me, finding my own seat instead. Even Ethan, as oblivious as he could be, sensed something was off between us.
What on earth is going on between you two? Is this for real?
I made a joke that went too far and caused a misunderstanding with his girlfriend.
Was it really just a joke?
Narrator, tone, uneasy. Despite these thoughts, I felt a bit uneasy. I handed the drunken Lily over to Ethan. Ignoring his protests, I hurriedly took a cab back home. When I opened the door, I was stunned. Narrator, tone, shocked. The house was spotless, immaculately clean. But all the couple's items were halved. Slippers, cushions, mugs, stuffed animals, toothbrushes.
James, tone, panicked. What's going on here?
Narrator, tone, shocked. I rushed into the bedroom and found that Sarah had taken all her clothes, even the matching socks were halved. I had been out for less than 3 hours, and the whole place looked like no one else had ever lived there.
James, tone, bewildered. No joke, my girlfriend had vanished into thin air.
I ran into Sarah outside the private room. She was holding a takeout bag, standing there blankly, unsure of how much of the conversation she had overheard. I shot her a glare and walked off in another direction. It wasn't long before Sarah caught up with me. She didn't dare grab my hand, just followed closely behind.
Are you happy?
Not really.
I stopped, and she halted as well.
Why did you pack this?
I thought I'd bring it to you. Don't you love the spicy beef from this place?
I found it a bit surprising. The old Sarah would never express herself so directly. She would avoid my previous questions and then casually ask, "Do you want to eat together?" Back then, I loved her shy demeanor, but now I found this straightforward approach even more appealing.
What does my liking it have to do with you? Weren't you going to leave?
No. Let me stay, please.
Sarah clung to me as we went back home. When I stepped inside, I noticed she had restored everything. 2 pairs of matching but differently colored slippers were neatly placed by the door. Sarah diligently set the table with the packed food and helped me sit down. But I didn't start eating right away. Instead, I asked her,
How much did you hear earlier?
Almost everything.
Do you believe now that there's nothing between her and me?
I believe you. I've always believed you.
Really?
With that, I stopped paying attention to her, picked up my chopsticks, and started eating. All that talking had made me starving. Despite these thoughts, I felt a bit uneasy. I handed the drunken Lily over to Ethan.
Hey, wait a minute. What's going on here?
Ignoring his protests, I hurriedly took a cab back home. When I opened the door, I was stunned. The house was spotless, immaculately clean. But all the couple's items were halved. Slippers, cushions, mugs, stuffed animals, toothbrushes. I rushed into the bedroom and found that Sarah had taken all her clothes, even the matching socks were halved. I had been out for less than 3 hours, and the whole place looked like no one else had ever lived there. No joke, my girlfriend had vanished into thin air. I ran downstairs and, to my surprise, saw the very person I was thinking about at the entrance of the community. Sarah was leaning against the car, staring blankly into the community. When she saw me, she straightened up, looking a bit nervous.
I missed you a bit, was just about to leave.
She didn't finish her sentence because I had already wrapped my arms around her waist.
Tell me about high school, will you?
Sarah hesitated for a long time before she finally started speaking reluctantly. Young love often comes unexpectedly, and by the time you realize it, you've already been watching the other person for a long time. Sarah realized her feelings for me in such a sudden awakening. She and I were from completely different circles. She was the model student praised by all the teachers, while I was the troublemaker least liked by the dean. She was always called up to give speeches, while I skipped half of those assemblies to sleep in the classroom. Our only interaction was probably the disciplinary checklists where she was the checker and I was the one getting points deducted. It took her a long time to muster the courage to hand me that letter. But at the botanical garden entrance, she saw me and Lily playfully walking in together, without sparing her a glance. She returned home heartbroken and was called to the office for a scolding by the teacher on Monday.
At that time, I thought, maybe I was really unlikable. No friends, and not liked by anyone.
As Sarah spoke, tears silently fell.
But that was a long time ago. James, it's not that I don't value your love. You shine so brightly, while I am dull and rigid. I was so immersed in my own insecurities that I overlooked the fact that every time you looked at me, your eyes were only on me. Would you give me another chance?
That day, I followed Sarah back home. But I didn't relent on the last question she asked me.
What are you trying to prove? You've already moved back, why keep being stubborn?
I just can't get over it.
As I walked towards Sarah's company, the thought that Sarah once saw me as a stand-in made my anger flare up instantly. More than that, I was mad at her for not valuing herself. If it weren't for my dad asking me to deliver some documents, I wouldn't have come to see her. As I approached the entrance, I hung up the phone. I caught a glimpse of Sarah and Lily entering a cafe downstairs together. Worried that Lily might stir up trouble again, I quickly followed them in. I hadn't seen Lily in a while, she still looked as haggard as before.
You've won, James is yours.
Sarah remained silent.
To be honest, the messages I sent you before were all made up. James never traveled alone with me, never timed his birthday wishes for me, and certainly never learned to cook just for me. I lied to you for 10 years, almost deceived myself too.
Traveling alone? Every time we traveled, Ethan was with us. Timed birthday wishes? If sending a quick red envelope after seeing her social media counts. Learning to cook? That was because I whimsically signed up for a cooking class. Realizing the truth, I stormed in.
What are you two arguing about?
James isn't mine. He belongs only to himself. If I were you, I would boldly pursue him instead of deceiving myself.
She seemed unwilling to say more and stood up to leave. Turning around, she met my furious gaze. I confronted Lily.
All these years, I treated you like a brother, and you wanted to be with me?
I was furious that she treated me like an object to be fought over.
After giving her a piece of my mind, I pulled Sarah away from the battlefield. Why didn't you tell me?
How could she have been in contact with Lily all this time? Especially since Lily had been sending her fabricated stories.
I didn't want to affect your relationship with her because of me. Keeping in touch with her was the only way I could see how you were doing.
Her words made my heart skip a beat.
You've been keeping an eye on me all this time?
I don't know why, but I just couldn't forget you.
When I met you at my dad's company.
I knew about it beforehand. I worked hard to make the company eligible to collaborate with your father, hoping to get lucky.
What I thought was our first meeting was actually a reunion across time. What I thought was a reunion was a long-planned approach. Sarah had relied on the fake sweet daily stories sent by Lily to get through college and her startup days. It wasn't until Lily went abroad that she dared to muster the courage shattered in high school and take a step closer to me.
Are you silly? If you missed me, you could have come to me directly. Remember, you were never a substitute for anyone.
Hearing my words, Sarah trembled, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clung tightly to my waist.
At least now I can be by your side.
Looking at this silly girl, I lowered my head and pressed a firm kiss on her lips. Despite these thoughts, I felt a bit uneasy. I handed the drunken Lily over to Ethan.
Are you sure you'll be okay getting home by yourself?
Ignoring his protests, I hurriedly took a cab back home. When I opened the door, I was stunned. The house was spotless, immaculately clean. But all the couple's items were halved. Slippers, cushions, mugs, stuffed animals, toothbrushes. I rushed into the bedroom and found that Sarah had taken all her clothes, even the matching socks were halved. I had been out for less than 3 hours, and the whole place looked like no one else had ever lived there. No joke, my girlfriend had vanished into thin air.